Illinois faces some big challenges. Today, we're about to hear a truly honest analysis of the problems we face. Equally as important, you'll also hear an in-depth discussion of some practical solutions. This is your radio source for stories, the insight, and the answers you won't hear anywhere else. Not in the media and not coming from Springfield. You're listening to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Now, here's your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Good afternoon, Dan Proft, and on this edition of Illinois Rising, joined by Michael Lucci, who's the Vice President of Policy for the Illinois Policy Institute. And Michael, it's an exciting week upcoming. We have the President of the United States coming to Springfield, returning to the scene of his state-level crimes, visiting old friends, Tony Resco and others who are out of jail formally, including out of their halfway house service. And he is going to speak to the General Assembly and bring people together. We're going to have, there's no red Illinois, no blue Illinois, there's only Illinois, and we need to all come together to solve the budget impasse, to pay the $6 billion in unpaid bills, and to steady the state of Illinois.
Well, he's right that Illinois has traditionally been a one-party system, that it's not really been a red Illinois at all. It's pretty much been a blue Illinois. And that has brought us to where we are today. And so we'll see what the Kumbaya songs are about when he comes in and see if he actually advocates for some of the changes that he's talked about at the federal level. Specifically, he does advocate in favor of term limits and redistricting reform. So it'll be interesting to see if he actually brings that up in the chamber controlled by Speaker Madigan, who, completely opposes those type of reform ideas, which are just good government reform ideas that even President Obama is on board with.
Yeah, and Governor Rauner in his State of the State address made a point to invoke the name of President Obama in support of redistricting reform, ending gerrymandering effectively, as well as term limits. For more on the president's visit to Springfield, as somebody who served with the president in Springfield when they were just lowly state legislators, he is Congressman Peter Roskam, who joins us now. Peter, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
So, what's the buzz in D.C. about the president's coming home trip? Literally to Springfield, where he announced his presidential campaign, as well as where he served for almost a decade as a state senator. What's the buzz inside the Beltway? And then, as somebody who's steeped in Illinois politics, what do you expect him to say when he addresses the General Assembly? Well,
I think on Capitol Hill and so forth, when people talk about Illinois in some ways, they really roll their eyes. I mean, when you talk to conservatives on Capitol Hill and think about the trajectory of Barack Obama, there's a lot of teasing and stuff, but it's like, hey, he's a product of Illinois, and look where we are now. So it's not a surprise that he would sort of do a nostalgia trip. But I think what's interesting, and the irony is this: the president has proposed 8 budgets now. None of them balance. The last few don't even pretend to balance. And so he's going now down to Springfield, and this is a president who is raised to an art form blaming other people. He's blamed Congress, he blames the courts, he blames foreign leaders. He blamed the public, basically, in his, some of his elections. And the subtext of what he said is, these ideas that I've tried to bring to you are so great, you just haven't been able to understand how great they are. So I would imagine that it will be a partisan event, that he will chastise the governor, which is unfair. And I don't think he recognizes the clarity of the leadership that Bruce Rauner, for example, is trying to bring to Springfield to fix a mess that the president's party is not just complicit in, but they are originators. This is the net result of their policy.
So on policy and politics, then, what we have is President Obama scaling the Chicago model nationally and then coming back to celebrate it with his Chicago Democrat friends. That should be heap big fun.
Yeah, this is it. And it's real sharp-elbowed stuff, you know what I mean? So if you criticize or, if you're not part of their orthodoxy, they don't want to hear about it. And so the president is very quick to blame rather than do some substantive reflection, to reflect on the weakness of Obamacare, to reflect on the false claims, the idea that some of the architects of Obamacare said that the only way they could pass it was to deceive people and to not fully disclose. And what I've noticed about the president is an incapacity to be reflective and about weaknesses of the worldview that he has adopted, and instead he defends, and he hasn't fundamentally changed his position, Dan. What he's done over the years, at many different opportunities for him to move away from it. He had an opportunity in 2010, in 2012, in 2014, and so forth. Never has he shied away from it, and instead it's just, full speed ahead with more spending, more diminutive U.S. strength that's projected around the world, a social agenda that just takes your breath away, and here we are.
Representative, this is Michael Lucci. We recently looked at just the issue of taxes, and we noticed that there's a Chicago Democrat advocating strongly for a tax hike at every level of government they can touch. So at the city level, the county level, the state level, and the President Obama at the federal level. Do you think there's any chance that he comes into Springfield and can talk about a compromise that doesn't involve a tax hike? Or do you think that they're just ideologically wed to the idea that taxes will solve whatever problem it is, and that's why you see a Chicago mayor advocating for huge tax hikes, Cook County, they're advocating for huge tax hikes. Same thing with the Chicago Democrats in the State House and in the White House.
There is every indication that the president's going to come in and advocate for a tax hike for the exact reasons that you mentioned. I just had the Tax Foundation in my office yesterday walking through live tax models where they put in, this tax rate, and they give you a projection based on their economic modeling about what happens to the economy and so forth with this tax hike or lowering that tax rate and so forth. And it is as clear as can be. So here's the liberal worldview that the president will espouse, I think, when he's down in Springfield. It's a zero-sum game economy. In other words, the only way that someone else can be successful is at the demise of another person. They can't be successful because they came up with some innovative idea or worked hard or took a risk or innovated. It has to be that there was some unfair advantage. And therefore, you get into this sort of flashpoint legacy. Let me just make one other point. The Obama campaign of 2008, none of us went for. You know what I mean? We knew it was nonsense, but there was at least an aspiration to it. The 2012 campaign was very heavy, very dark. The 2012 campaign was, the 1%ers and so forth. You didn't build that. And the American public was told for the first time since Franklin Roosevelt, basically, that you're stuck in your station in life. And the only way that you can get out of your station in life is if a federal government comes and helps you out. And that's a philosophical debate that we have to win. We've got to win that in 2016 because Barack Obama is feeding the notion that you can't get out of your station in life and that it's essentially a caste system and you're stuck.
Oh, we're talking to Congressman Peter Roskam, and President Obama and his Chicago Democrat friends in the General Assembly are trying to make sure you can't get out of your station in life with their policy choices. But it's interesting because he's going to come to Springfield and he's going to talk to supermajorities of Democrats in both the House and the Senate who can do anything they want to do. They can override a gubernatorial veto, but they don't want to wear the jacket for the policies they actually are advancing. They want shared blame so that they don't suffer solely at the ballot box for the implications of higher taxes and bigger government.
Yeah, that's it exactly. And so what the president does is he redefines bipartisanship. He'll call on them to be bipartisan, but what he really is saying is bipartisanship is you vote for our stuff.
Right.
That's what bipartisanship is. Republican votes on liberal programs. And that's a losing proposition, and Republicans in the General Assembly shouldn't go for it.
And now on the politics of this, just a quick political question. Do you see this as Rahm, who invited the president to speak and who needs all the political help he can get these days, and Cullerton trying to put Madigan on an island? I know they're allies of sorts, but, this is a den of thieves, so it's every man for himself. So trying to trying to triangulate Madigan, put him on an island, and have Obama provide some political cover for them, Rahm and Cullerton, to maybe move a little bit in Rauner's direction to try and get some deals done.
I hadn't thought of that, but I think that's a good insight. I hadn't thought of that. I got to process that a little bit. That it's very much more Machiavellian that it perceives, and the internecine warfare among Springfield Democrats is in full bloom. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I hadn't thought of that.
All right, well, you go read The Prince, and then you get back to us. All right, Congressman Peter Roskin, thanks so much for joining us.
Guys.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.